They tell me they're healthy. They exercise, they eat relatively well, but somewhere between their late 40s and mid 50s, they notice things slowing down. Not dramatically, not overnight, just quietly. Maybe it takes a little longer to feel ready. Maybe the firmness isn't quite what it was. Maybe recovery time stretched from hours to a day or more. And here's what almost every single one of them says: Doc, I thought it was just me. Let me be very clear about something. If this feels familiar, you are not broken, you're not failing, and you're certainly not alone. What you're experiencing is one of the most common yet rarely discussed changes that happens to men as they age. And the reason nobody talks about it isn't because it's shameful. It's because most people don't understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. See, when men come to me with these concerns, they often assume it's about testosterone, or libido, or stress. And yes, those things can play a role. But what I've found time and time again is that the real issue starts somewhere most men never think to look. It starts with blood flow. Now, I know that might sound simple, almost too simple, but stay with me. Because the reason this matters so much is that blood flow is the foundation of almost everything your body does in moments of intimacy. It's what creates responsiveness. It's what maintains firmness. It's what allows you to show up the way you want to show up. And here's the part that catches most men off guard. Your blood flow starts declining years before you notice any major symptoms. It's not a sudden drop. It's gradual, subtle, like a dimmer switch being turned down one tiny notch at a time. You might have one or two nights where things don't go as planned and you brush it off. Bad day, long week, stress at work. But then it happens again and again. And eventually you realize this isn't just a random off day anymore. This is your new normal. And that realization, it does something to your confidence, doesn't it? Because suddenly there's this mental hesitation that wasn't there before. You start wondering if your partner notices. You start questioning whether you should even initiate. And what began as a physical shift quietly becomes an emotional one too. I see this all the time. Men who are strong, capable, successful in every other area of their lives, but in this one area, they feel like they're losing ground, and they don't know how to fix it. Here's what I want you to understand. The fact that you're noticing these changes doesn't mean you're unhealthy. In fact, some of the fittest men I treat experience this. Men who run marathons, men who lift weights 5 days a week, men whose cholesterol and blood pressure look perfect on paper. Because the truth is, even if your heart is strong and your arteries are clear, there's something happening at the cellular level that most routine checkups never measure. And it has everything to do with a molecule called nitric oxide. Now, before your eyes glaze over thinking I'm about to get too technical, I'm not. Because understanding nitric oxide is actually incredibly simple. And once you understand it, everything else I'm about to share will make perfect sense. Think of nitric oxide as the on switch for your blood vessels. When your body produces nitric oxide, it sends a signal to the smooth muscle cells lining your blood vessels, telling them to relax. When they relax, blood flows more freely, more efficiently, exactly when and where you need it. Without enough nitric oxide, those blood vessels stay partially constricted, tight, stiff. Even if your heart is pumping perfectly, even if there's no blockage, the vessels themselves can't open up the way they're supposed to. And that's when you start noticing the subtle changes I mentioned earlier. Now, here's the frustrating part. After age 50, your body's ability to produce nitric oxide drops. Not because you're doing anything wrong, not because you're out of shape, simply because the enzymes responsible for creating nitric oxide slow down as part of the natural aging process. It's like having a factory that's been running smoothly for decades, and suddenly the machinery starts operating at 70% capacity instead of 100. The blueprints are still there, the workers are still there, but the output just isn't what it used to be. And this is where most men make a critical mistake. They assume the solution is to push harder, work out more, take aggressive supplements, pop a pill, and hope for the best. But here's what I've learned after treating thousands of men. The body doesn't respond well to being bullied. It responds to being supported. And that's exactly where something as simple as a scoop of the right ingredient in your morning tea can make all the difference. I'm talking about beetroot, specifically concentrated beetroot powder. And no, this isn't some trendy superfood fad. This is backed by solid clinical research that cardiologists and vascular specialists have been quietly using for years. Here's why it works. Beetroot is naturally rich in dietary nitrates. When you consume these nitrates, your body converts them directly into nitric oxide through a process that doesn't rely on those aging enzymes I mentioned earlier. It bypasses the slowdown. It gives your body a second pathway to produce the nitric oxide it desperately needs. In clinical trials with older adults, beetroot supplementation increased nitric oxide levels by 30 to 40%. 30 to 40%. And what does that translate to in real life? Better circulation, faster response time, improved firmness, not through artificial stimulation, but through natural vascular support. But here's where most men go wrong and why I'm taking the time to walk you through this carefully. Because knowing about beetroot isn't enough. How you take it, when you take it, and what mistakes you avoid. That's what determines whether this actually works for you or becomes just another thing you tried that didn't pan out. And that's exactly what we're going to cover next, because I don't want you to waste your time or money on something that only works if you do it right. Let me share something that happens in my practice all the time. A patient comes back after 2 weeks and says, "Doc, I tried the beetroot thing, didn't work." And when I ask them to walk me through exactly what they did, I almost always find the same handful of mistakes. These aren't complicated mistakes. They're not obvious ones either. But they're the difference between men who see real results and men who give up thinking nothing helps. So let's start with the biggest one: dosing. Most men, when they first try beetroot powder, use maybe half a teaspoon, sometimes less. They sprinkle a little bit in their smoothie or stir it into water and think, well, I'm taking it. And technically, yes, they are. But here's the problem. Clinical studies that show meaningful improvements in blood flow use between 3 and 5 grams per dose. That's roughly 1 full scoop, depending on the powder. When you're only using a quarter of that amount, you're not giving your body enough raw material to actually shift nitric oxide production. It's like trying to fill a car's gas tank with a cup of fuel and wondering why you're not getting very far. Now, I understand why this happens. We've been conditioned to think a little goes a long way with supplements, and sometimes that's true. But with beetroot nitrates, the research is very clear. Dose matters a lot. So here's what I tell my patients. Use 1 full scoop. Mix it into warm tea, not boiling, just warm, and drink it consistently. Which brings me to the second mistake, expecting instant results. I get it. We live in a world of immediate gratification. You take a pill, you want it to work within the hour. But nitric oxide support doesn't function that way. This isn't a stimulant. It's not forcing your body to do something it doesn't want to do. It's gently restoring a natural process that's been declining. And restoration takes time. What the research shows, and what I see clinically, is that vascular responsiveness builds over days and weeks, not hours. Your blood vessels need time to remember how to relax properly. The endothelial cells lining those vessels need time to respond to the increased nitric oxide signaling. Most men start noticing subtle shifts around the 7 to 10 day mark. Maybe they wake up with better morning energy. Maybe they notice they're responding a little faster than they were 2 weeks ago. By the 2 to 3 week point, the changes become more consistent, more reliable. But if you try it for 3 days and quit because nothing happened, you're stopping right before your body was about to turn the corner. Now, here's a mistake that genuinely surprises people when I bring it up, and it has to do with your mouth, specifically mouthwash. You see, the conversion of dietary nitrates into nitric oxide doesn't just happen in your stomach or your bloodstream. A critical part of this process actually begins in your mouth, where beneficial bacteria convert those nitrates into nitrites, which your body then turns into nitric oxide. But when you use antibacterial mouthwash, especially the strong ones that kill 99% of bacteria, you're wiping out those beneficial bacteria along with everything else. And studies have shown that regular mouthwash use can drop nitric oxide production by up to 60%. 60%. So you could be doing everything else right, taking the correct dose, being patient, staying consistent, and still sabotaging your results every time you rinse with mouthwash twice a day. Now, I'm not saying you can never use mouthwash, but if you're serious about supporting blood flow, you need to at least avoid it around the times you're taking your beetroot dose. Give those bacteria a chance to do their job. And here's one more habit that quietly works against you, even though it seems completely unrelated: sitting still all day. I know. You've heard it before. Sitting is the new smoking. Everyone says it. But let me tell you why it matters specifically for nitric oxide and blood flow. When you move, even gentle movement like walking, your blood vessels experience something called shear stress. That's just a fancy term for the friction of blood moving along the vessel walls. And that shear stress is actually a signal. It tells your endothelial cells to produce more nitric oxide. But when you sit for hours on end, that signaling drops dramatically. Your vessels become sluggish. They stop responding as efficiently, and all the beetroot powder in the world can't fully compensate if you're not giving your body the movement signals it needs. So here's what I recommend. If you're taking beetroot in the morning or early afternoon, try to get in a 10 to 20-minute walk later in the day. Nothing intense, just movement. A stroll around the block, a walk to grab coffee, anything that gets your blood circulating and your vessels responding. All right, let me tie all of this together into something simple. Something you can actually do starting tomorrow morning. Here's the protocol I give my patients, and it's about as straightforward as it gets. 1 scoop of beetroot powder, 3 to 5 grams, mixed into a cup of warm tea. Not boiling water because extreme heat can degrade some of the beneficial compounds. Just warm, comfortably drinkable. Take it mid-morning or early afternoon. Consistency matters more than precise timing, but somewhere in that window tends to work well for most men. Avoid antibacterial mouthwash, especially within a few hours of your dose. And at some point during the day, get moving for 10 to 20 minutes. Doesn't have to be exercise, just movement. That's it. 4 simple things. Now here's what most men report when they actually stick with this for 1 to 3 weeks. They don't usually describe some dramatic overnight transformation. What they describe is more subtle, more foundational. They'll say things like, I just feel more ready, like my body's responding the way it used to. Or, I'm not second guessing myself as much. I feel more confident initiating. Some men notice their morning energy is better. Some notice they're recovering faster between intimate moments. Some just feel like their body is more cooperative, more responsive, less resistant. And here's the thing I want you to really understand. These changes aren't just about intimacy, they're about circulation, whole body circulation. When you support nitric oxide production, you're not just helping blood flow in one specific area, you're helping your heart work more efficiently. You're helping oxygen reach your brain more effectively. You're improving stamina, endurance, even mental clarity in some cases. This is vascular maintenance. And just like you wouldn't skip oil changes for your car and expect it to run smoothly for years, you can't ignore vascular health and expect your body to perform the way it did when you were 30. I've had patients in their 60s tell me this simple daily habit gave them back something they thought was gone for good. Not just physical responsiveness, but the confidence that comes with knowing their body will show up when it matters. And I've had men in their 50s tell me they wish they'd started this years earlier, before the decline became so noticeable. So here's what I want you to remember. Aging doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean accepting decline as inevitable. But it does mean working with your body instead of against it. It means understanding what your body needs and giving it the support to do what it's designed to do. You don't need aggressive interventions. You don't need synthetic solutions that come with a list of side effects. What you need is to restore the natural process that's been quietly fading. Try this consistently. Give it 2 weeks minimum before you make any judgments. Pay attention to the small shifts, not just the big ones. And remember, small daily habits often restore what aggressive fixes never could. Your body hasn't forgotten how to respond. It just needs the right support to remember.